Let me stay with taxes for a second. So the implication of don't vote just encourages the bastards, even if this is not the thematic basis for your book, is all this anger out there. You know, the implicate sort of ties into, or you would imagine it would tie into all this anger out there, which of course emanates from this thing, the Tea Party. And we don't even know what this thing is. As we've discussed ourselves previously, the Tea Party is not actually one thing. It's not even a party.
No.
It's a sort of a movement.
It's a mood. It's a mood, it's an attitude.
Talk about that, because right now, clearly, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the most interesting thing going on in politics right now, other than Christine O'Donnell, is the Tea Party and the effect that the Tea Party has had in transforming, for good or for ill, the politics of this country.
America has a long history of populist movements. Some of these populist movements have been good populist movements. The abolitionists were a populist movement. Civil rights campaign was a populist movement. Some of these movements have been not so good. The Know Nothings, the anti-immigrant, were not a good populist movement. I personally would argue that Jacksonian Democrats were not a particularly good populist movement. The agrarian populists of the late 19th century wanted free coinage of silver. Basically, they wanted to devalue the dollar so that they could have very low interest rates on the mortgages on the farms that they bought that they couldn't afford. Sounds modern somehow. The progressives, that was a populist movement in the early 20th century, extending right down to this day. They wanted reform in city government, but they also wanted city planning, central planning for our cities, which got us our lovely housing developments for housing projects for poor people that have worked out so well, and the beautiful highways that go right through the middle of our cities and had to be replaced in Boston with the big dig at a cost of $1 trillion, and that kind of thing. So populist movements have been around for a long time. It's very interesting to see a populist movement that isn't demanding something from government. Populist movements, good, bad, and indifferent, have all been demanding something from government. Tea Party is out there demanding less from the government. Saying, roll this back.
Stop doing stuff.
Stop giving us stuff. You know, quit giving us stuff. Quit. You know, quit providing all these positive benefits from government. Get this benefit system under control. Extremely unusual. And I was talking to a group a few months back, and I brought this point up, and I said, well, where in the history, in American history, do we see a populist movement asking for less from government? Right. And a voice from the back of the room said, the Whiskey Rebellion. Oh, well, I was for that too.
Right. It's kind of a good example.
Yeah.
But the point is that the Tea Party, quote, movement, it's really a loose collection of people who don't necessarily even agree on fundamental issues that we take for granted that they're all in sync about. Some of them are for economic conservatism, for instance. Some of them are for social conservatism. I mean, it really is a range of things.
I think they're all for economic conservatism. Right. If you get them off the small top center point of the size and scope of government and the intrusion of government into life, and particularly into our economic life, once outside that small circle, you then find that the people in the Tea Party would be all over the map. Mm-hmm. I actually happened to do a story. We were talking about this earlier. I did a story for a magazine called World Affairs, Foreign Policy magazine, about Tea Party foreign policy. And I started this story by saying, this is going to be a tough story because there is no Tea Party foreign policy, and upon close inspection, there is no Tea Party, you know, so this is going to be tough to write.
It's just basically a bunch of people who are angry.
Yeah. Well, but I said, you know, any political movement, any political tendency has foreign policy implications. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure out what the foreign policy implications were in the Tea Party. And truly, I found people 360 degrees. From extreme isolationists to, so it went from extreme isolationists to nuke Iran. You know, they weren't on the same page. I found the same thing about what we call family values, social conservatism. There were a lot of social conservatives definitely involved in the Tea Party groups that I talked to, but there were also some very pure libertarians who were not interested in government involvement in this. I did not encounter any racism, I may say, but I did encounter a certain amount of xenophobia, a certain amount of, maybe not even xenophobia wouldn't be right, but hostility to the idea of illegal immigrants. Much of this was based not on ethnic origin of the illegal immigrants, but on the fact that in the Tea Party perception, illegal immigrants were gaining benefits from the government that were already too large, were also being expended upon not just citizens, but upon people who weren't citizens and who didn't even have the legal right to be here. And whenever I encounter, I happen to be a very pro-immigration myself. I'm kind of.
Why is that?
Are you a Sioux? Am I a Cheyenne? Where'd we come from? This is a nation of immigrants.
Right.
And when it comes to the big question of immigration at the moment, which is Hispanic, I'm a Catholic. They're Catholics. They have family values. They place great importance on the family. They've got swell food. Where's the downside? They're hard-working people.
I haven't heard anybody yet make the argument that the reason that we should be forgiving of the immigrant swell food. I think swell food is that's a novel approach to this.
Well, were you ever in England before they had immigrants? Swell food is an important thing that we.
I'm beginning to understand the history of the world through a very different lens now. This is actually.
Anyway, I happen to be very pro-immigrant, and I think that, and I worry whenever I see a little bit of xenophobia. But then again, I got to say, I'm not sure I encountered any more xenophobia among Tea Party members than among ordinary Americans taking it.
There's some of that stuff to go around.
It's a lot of it in the air. There's no doubt.